Hi, I'm Steve, and I want to talk to you today about the iFi Audio Pro iDSD. It's kind of a high-performance multi-tool for audio. So it's a combination DAC, digital to analog converter, stereo preamp, headphone amp, and music streamer. So I primarily used it as a DAC and a preamp in my system. And in my system, I normally use an Oppo BDP 105 as both my disc player and kind of as my preamp because I have it connected directly to my stereo power amp. However, to try out this DAC, I used a coaxial digital connection out from the Oppo into the iFi. And then from there, I went from the iFi straight into my power amp. So I was using its DAC capabilities and its stereo preamp circuitry. I think probably most people that will be interested in this will be interested in it for its DAC capabilities. And it's pretty impressive as a DAC. This is absolutely the best DAC that I've ever had in my system. I was mainly listening to CDs, although I did also at one point connect my MacBook and listen to some high-res files from my computer. But just in general, the sound quality was very three-dimensional. For me, probably the most important aspect to sound quality is the sound staging. How the instruments and voices are presented on stage, how 3D the effect is, and also how much of the room where the recording happened is picked up. And this DAC was exceptional at doing all of those things. I listened to a lot of my favorite recordings, and I knew that I was supposed to be trying to listen critically, but time and again I just kept getting so pulled into the music that I not only listened to the track that I was intending to, but I just listened to several more tracks because it was just sounding so good. And I think the reason for that is it's got very high quality DACs. It uses 4 high-resolution Burr-Brown DACs used in an interleaved array to handle just a stereo signal. So there's a lot of processing power there for the signal. And then also, iFi pays a lot of attention to rejecting noise and interference in their gear. And one way they do that, for instance, is this AC power adapter, which, as you can see, it's a lot bigger than the typical small wall wart that you see a lot of times on gear. And there's just a lot more going on in this thing as far as conditioning the power and making sure there's as little interference as possible coming in through the AC power. As far as the controls on the front, because this unit does so much, most of the controls have multi-functions. So for instance, there is a little LED indicator up here in the corner, and that tells you what the operation mode is of the DAC, whether it's warming up, whether it's in solid state mode, tube mode, or in protection mode. And yeah, you heard me right. There's both solid state and tube operating modes for this guy. And that really intrigued me because this unit has both a tube and a solid state input stage and output stage. And there's a 3-position switch on the front panel where you can select either solid state, tube, or something that iFi calls Tube Plus. And that is a mode where it reduces the negative feedback in the circuit, and then also sort of enhances the sound through adding a little bit of second order harmonic distortion, which that's one of the things that a lot of people attribute the sound of tubes to. And tubes generally are supposed to sound warm, and a lot of times analog is the adjective that's used for tube sound. So when I was switching back and forth, I expected there to be a pretty noticeable difference between the solid state and the tube modes. And I didn't really actually hear that. It kind of surprised me. Both modes were very clean and open and dynamic, but I didn't hear sort of the stereotypical tube sound that a lot of people talk about when I was in tube mode. So actually, for the most part, I generally left it in solid state mode. There's a lot of sound processing and digital filtering, and you can actually choose from that and to kind of customize the sound a little more. And that's kind of unusual for a DAC. I mean, typically, there's the sound that the designer intended for the component, and that's your one option. But iFi gives you several different options. So, for instance, you can choose to have like basically a non-oversampling mode, and that's both for PCM signals and for DSD. Or you can have it do PCM upsampling, or you can have it do DSD remastering. I did try several of the filtering options for PCM, and again, not sure if it was because my system just wasn't revealing enough, or because my hearing is starting to fade, but I had a hard time hearing really meaningful differences between the filter options. So I ended up going with sort of the two kind of vanilla flavored options, which would be called BitPerfect and BitPerfect Plus. And again, in both cases, the sound was just incredibly clean. There was, if I had to use one word to describe the sound, it would be transparency, because again, you could hear so far into the soundstage, very low level details. Pretty much on every recording I listened to, I was hearing details that I hadn't heard before. And I talked about how flexible this unit is, and that goes for sort of the kind of system that you have. I mean, I think that I mainly used it as part of a 2-channel stereo system. It was connected to my amplifier driving a pair of speakers. But as you can see, because of its small size, you could easily use it in a desktop system to power, connect it to a pair of powered speakers. It would be terrific. And also, it has a great headphone amplifier built in. There are 3 different connections on the front panel for hooking up your headphone. There's a standard 1/4-inch connector, there's a mini jack connector, and there's a balanced connector as well. I just used the 1/4-inch connector with a couple of different headphones. I'm not a big headphone guy, but I could definitely tell that the headphone amp in this unit was quite a bit better than the dedicated headphone amp in my Oppo player, which is actually known to be a pretty strong headphone amp. So as far as the inputs and outputs, this has both RCA and balanced XLR outputs for connecting to your amplifier. On the input side, it has a single combination connector for coaxial and mini optical input. There's both type A and type B USB. There is AES, EBU, XLR, which is a balanced form of digital input. And then as far as network connections, there's an Ethernet connection, and then there's also a built-in Wi-Fi with a Wi-Fi antenna. I didn't actually use any of the network connections, but this unit does come set up to play Spotify, TIDAL, including MQA, and Qobuz. The one thing is that it does come with a remote control. It is a to control volume only, so it's a very basic remote control. And if there's one thing that I might have wished for with this unit, is I wished that it kind of had a more full function remote control for the preamp features. For instance, like selecting inputs and things like that. And also the display, it tells you, useful things like mostly about what the incoming signal is, but it doesn't have something like volume level, which I think would be useful, because I usually try to keep it within a certain volume range when I'm listening to different recordings. All right, so that's pretty much it for the iFi Audio Pro iDSD DAC preamp, headphone amp, and streamer. If you have any questions, leave a comment below. If you like this video, hit the like button. And if you'd like to see more content, subscribe to our YouTube channel.